Good evening. Today, we're going to be going through all the pilots in Armored Core 6, Fires of Rubicon. Each pilot is really unique, and it's one of the reasons why this game is one of my favorite games of all time, maybe even my favorite game of all time. So let's get started. I think we need to open it to page 351. Let's move this out of the way. Oopsies. 351. Ah, yes. Here it is. The first one we'll be talking about is Invincible Rummy. Invincible Rummy, he is kind of a joke in the game. He's really easy to defeat in the arena and in the real world. He only has a chainsaw and a shotgun. And he's an interesting character because he thinks he's invincible. His name is Invincible Rummy. But what really happens is every time he loses a fight, he forgets about it the next time he gets high off of coral. And so he never remembers when he loses. And so he thinks he's invincible. He's got a really cool armor scheme, and I actually really like his style, and his voice actor is really good too. He's the first arena battle. Next we have Index Dunham. Index Dunham is part of the RLF. He is more or less one of the main grunts, and each RLF member in High Command has a name associated with the part with one of the fingers of the hand, and he is Index. His AC is really cool. I really like the bows parts, and he has some cool weapons as well. The bows parts always struck a chord in me because they're so blocky. And he uses bows weapons. Gun 6 Red. Gun 6 Red is an interesting character because he's part of the Red Guns. And he grew up wanting to be like Gun 1 Michigan, which is his commander. And he always held his commander in high regard. All of the Red Guns ACs, including Gun 6 Red, they use all of these like kinetic weaponry, which I really like. Nozark. Nozark is really cool. He's kind of a minor character in Armored Core 6. He's got a cool color scheme, and he uses really expensive weaponry. His gimmick is that he takes on tons of debt that he has no intention to pay. And so you find him holed up inside of an enemy fortress, alone behind enemy lines, just holding out and waiting for his debtors to come and try to collect the debt he owes. He only appears once in the game, but it's an interesting interaction. Maeterlinck. This is my wife's favorite. Maeterlinck is interesting. Similarly to Nozark, she only plays a minor role, but actually her role is more involved than Nozark's is because she's part of the Vespers. She is V6, so she's one of the lower ranking Vespers, and she uses pulse weaponry and pulse shields and all arquebus gear. As you can see, arquebus, they have really sleek designs. You fight her when you're right before you fight Ibis 240, and her and Wuhan get together and they team up on you. But of course, you, as 621 Raven, defeat them. Her characteristic is that she is averse to risk. Little Ziggy, one of my favorite characters. She is really cool, and her character appears 2, maybe 3 times in the game, and then she's mentioned by some other side characters in the game. You fight her whenever you're looking for logs after you've climbed the wall, and she finds out that you killed all of her friends, and it's kind of sad because she seeks vengeance, but you really figure out that due to her AC being so outdated and her weaponry being so non-optimal, that she's really not a match for 621. And she is considered the little sister of the RLF. And so the loss of her in the RLF is a tough blow for them. The little in her name refers to the pinky finger, similar to how Index Dunham was the index finger. So she's the pinky of the hand in the RLF. V7 Swinburne. He's the guy in the game that you really love to hate. He is just that weaselly, cowardly guy that will do anything to get away from death, even if it means dishonor. You fight him when you're investigating, or no, they put out a hit on him, and then you take up the contract to go and find him and kill him. And in the middle of the fight, if you get his HP to half, he will stop fighting you and he will try to bargain with you. And he'll ask for you to spare him, and he'll pay you if you do. And at this point, there's 3 different outcomes, really 2, but one branches off into another. You could keep trying to kill him, and he'll keep fighting you, and you defeat him. And that's the normal ending. A branch from that is you could accept his offer to take his money and let him go. But as soon as he turns his back, you could shoot him and kill him. And the third ending to his encounter is you can accept his offer and you can let him go, but then someone else comes to kill you for not killing him. So the encounter with Swinburne is a really interesting one. and it provides a lot of different voice lines and outcomes, which are really interesting. Gun 3, Wu Huahai. He is part of the Red Guns, and his thing is he was a big gambler, and he started a plague as part of a pharmaceutical company and killed millions of people, and they basically turned him into an augmented human in order for him to pay back for his crimes. And he's part of the Red Guns now. As with most of the Red Guns, he uses kinetic weaponry, the real blocky parts, and his AC is really kind of cool. He actually ends up betraying. Let me move this light closer. He ends up betraying the Red Guns and going over to the Vespers and fighting you along with V6 League. And it's an interesting fight. Of course, 621 ends up beating him. But yeah, that's Wu Huahai. We have Ring Freddy. Now the ring, he's part of the RLF. And so the ring pertains to the ring finger for him. And he's really interesting because he is like the paramour to the head of the RLF. He is in love with the head of the RLF, and he's part of their high command. And he pilots this AC that has tank treads. He has 2 missile launchers one in each hand, and he has a grenade launcher, the same grenade launcher on each shoulder. So it's kind of very symmetrical AC, and you see him once in game as part of an almost optional encounter. You could go start a mission and then go backwards instead of forwards through the mission, and you encounter him spying on you for the RLF. It's an interesting encounter. V5 Hawkins. Hawkins is an interesting character. They're all interesting. I say that they're all interesting, but he's interesting in that he's kind of a fatherly figure to V8 Pater, which we'll see later. And you fight him along with V8 Pater. You fight the two of them together, and you're teamed up with someone from the RLF, and you have a hit out on both of them. And you could really see how fatherly he is toward the other lower ranked Vesper. And yeah, he seems to have a good attitude, and he's not as sour as the other Vespers. It's a shame that we didn't see more voice lines from him. Gun 5 Iguazu. Oh, where to start with Gun 5 Iguazu? He is a very major part of the game in your first playthrough. You encounter him a few times, and the first time you encounter him, you basically show him up in a mission, and he gets really jealous, and he resolves to try to kill you every time he sees you for the rest of the game, even though you're on the same team. And because of his overwhelming jealousy. The second playthrough goes basically the same as the first. He just tries to kill you, but he's more desperate. And he actually ends up hiring a hitman, which we'll see later, to kill you, which obviously doesn't work because you're 621. In the third and final ending, this little weasel, he becomes the final bad guy that you need to fight. And it's so funny that FromSoft has created this character that you really just don't think twice about beating for 2 playthroughs. And the third playthrough, he becomes the final boss. And I think that's really great storytelling, and it's really unexpected. But his personality is he's very paranoid. He was a gambler, and he lost a lot of money and had to become an augmented human in order to pay off his debts. And now he's basically a slave along with the other Red Guns. And sorry, keep getting Discord messages. But yeah, very interesting character. You see him so many times, and you fight him many, many times in the game. And yeah, they really did a good job with him. The voice actor really nails it. It's a good job, Gun5 Iguazu. Oh, Roku Munson. Roku Munson does not belong this far down the list in the arena fights. He is so strong. He is so incredibly strong. I remember the first time I fought him, it probably took me a good 15 tries just to beat him, and I was so surprised. But he is kind of the gatekeeper for the next level in the arena, and so I guess that's why they kind of put him. I believe he's at the top of D tier in the arena. But he uses a lot of All Mind parts. And the reason for that is he seems to be one of All Mind's secret spies, which you eventually become in the third playthrough. He uses the hammer plasma thrower, the javelin missile launcher, and the coolest core in the game. And they're all Mind parts. And so that's kind of how you figure that he is part of All Mind. But interesting, he always talks to you in haiku, and his character is obsessed with Japanese culture. And he has a Japanese symbol as his emblem. And like I said, he always speaks in haikus, which is really interesting. And he's the one who's actually sent to kill you if you spare Swinburne. And that fight is really tough because then you fight Swinburne, and then you have to fight Roku Munson, who is much, much harder. Gun 4 Volta, rest in peace, my good friend. Gun 4 Volta is... I wish we could have seen more of him, but it makes sense that the game kills him off. He is friends with Gun5 Iguazu, and you, Gun5 and Gun4, are sent to destroy the dam. And the banter between the two and Gun1 Michigan is so fun to listen to. It's one of my favorite missions still. And you all three team up against Index Dunham, and of course you pummel him. And that's in the main original ending of the game. But he seems like a really good dude, and he seems like he genuinely likes Gun5 Iguazu and is trying to calm him down. But unfortunately, Gun5 Iguazu runs away, and during Operation Wall Climber, and Gun4 Volta, it has to try to climb the wall by himself, and he dies because Gun5 bails on him. So sad. I really like his character. V8 Pater. He seems like the secretary of the Vespers. He's fairly low ranked, but he's actually one of the tougher fights compared to some of the other Vespers, especially Swinburne. And his whole deal is he seems to have some sort of personality disorder where one side of his personality is very assertive and sort of type A, but another side of his personality is very type B, very friendly. And it's this duality. In fact, his AC is called dual nature because it reflects himself. And you'll see it when you fight him. Whenever the type B personality is in control, he'll say things like, "Oh no, please don't kill me." Oh, if you kill his friend, he'll say, "Oh, you killed my friend." And then he'll be really sad. But then his type A personality kicks in somehow out of the blue. And he's like, "Thank you. Now I could rise the ranks and kill you as well." It's really interesting to see his duality. And they made him a really interesting character. He gives you a lot of missions as part of the Vespers to do work for them. And then you end up killing him in a few different missions, depending on which ending you're going for. Really cool. And I like his AC. He has a very lightweight AC, lightweight parts, so he's very fast. Sula. Wow. Sula he's pretty tough. He is a first generation augmented human. And the first generation augmented humans, it's said that only 10% of them, of people who went through first generation coral augmentation survived. And so he was one of those 10%. And he solely lives to kill other people now. And you find out later that he is actually a spy for Allmind. He has the Javelin Alpha, the Javelin Beta missiles, and those are all Allmind parts that were awarded to him for doing work for Allmind. And he has killed multiple hounds, we should say, for Walter, who is your handler. And so he's killed basically many of your former comrades in arms. And yeah, he's got a really great voice actor too. But overall, his character is interesting. His fight is pretty difficult as well. It filters a lot of builds. That missile and the bazooka combo is no joke. Chatty Stick. Chatty Stick is basically an AI put into an armored core, but not just any AI. It's an intelligent AI built by Cinder Carla, which we'll see later. Chatty Stick has a really cool colored AC. He has 2 missiles on his back and 2 bazookas one bazooka in each hand. And he makes for an interesting fight because you fight him and Cinder Carla at the same time, and they just complement each other so well. And it makes the fight really tough. Chatty Stick as a character, he's a really good character. His voice actor is great. You actually come across Chatty Stick several times in the story, especially depending on which ending you go through. He helps you fight the Ice Worm. He helps you fight Arquebus forces in one ending. In another ending, you kill him and Cinder Carla. And in another ending, you take him out as just an AI. Yeah, he plays a big role, and you help him and Cinder Carla launch a missile. And that's always fun too. Really cool character. He's definitely a fan favorite. Middle Flatwell. Okay. Middle Flatwell is my personal favorite character. He's rocking all of the Elcano parts from Mesa legs, arms, core, and head, which I love those parts. I think they're some of the best looking in the game. His color scheme is really cool. His emblem, this bird, is really cool. His weapons are really good. He's my favorite character for sure. His voice actor is really cool, and he's a really level-headed guy. And they say he's the uncle of the RLF, and the middle sense for the middle finger. So he's like the middle, sort of the spine of the RLF, you could say. You work with him to take out Swinburne and Hawkins. So it's a 2v2, which is a really interesting mission. And I believe he gives you a couple missions as well. Really cool character. I really like him a lot. Oh, you fight him and Rusty in one ending, which is interesting. They both get away, thank God. But yeah, it's that's a cool AC, cool character. My favorite one. His AC's name is Tsupasa, which I think is an awesome name. Just all around great. V3 O'Keefe. Okay. If Middle Flatwell was my favorite character, V3 O'Keefe is probably, he's my second favorite, but just barely. V3 O'Keefe. He's got a quirky personality in where he's always tired and he's always drinking coffee. And a lot of his voice lines revolve around coffee. And I'm not sure, but like Keefe is a coffee brand. So I'm not sure if that has anything to do with it or not. But I just think it's really funny that they gave him this personality quirk. He's definitely, in my opinion, the coolest Vesper. He's friends with Rusty, who is also a really good Vesper, but Rusty is a spy. So his AC, I don't particularly like. FromSoft gave him the starter fire and control system, which is a really odd choice. So when you fight him in the story, it's just a really easy fight. But his voice lines go so hard. They go so hard. I mean, I think he has some of my favorite voice lines in the game. Incredible. AZ's name, though, is really cool. Baron Flower. I like his emblem, too. Oran, really cool character. Here's Cinder Carla. Cinder Carla is the leader of RAD. She basically was around before the fires of Ibis, and somehow she survived. And that's how she got the name Cinder. And I'm guessing she survived this whole time, maybe due to some sort of coral side effect or surgery. I'm not really sure, but definitely a huge character in the game. One of the main characters. She is an extremely talented engineer. She built the AI, which is Chatty Stick, and you fight her in one ending in the game. Her and Chatty stick together, and the first thing she does, she launches all of her missiles. She has a missile launcher in each hand and one on each shoulder. She launches all of her missiles, and then she comes toward you, and she kicks you. And that's her. It's just so cool. And she designed all the parts that are on her AC, and she designed basically all the parts that are, sold from RAD. And they have funny names. So the Full Course AC, her name is Full Course. That's the AC's name. And they all each body part pertains to some part of the meal. So she's very, very peculiar, very iconic, and very cool character. And her voice actor is amazing. Cold Call. Um, he only shows up once in the game. His AC is pretty cool. His character is pretty cool. He's basically a hitman, and Iguazu hires him to kill you at one point during the game in one of the endings. And of course, 621 defeats him, but he's actually pretty tough. I've definitely lost to him several times, and his arena fight is also pretty tough. He has really good energy weapons, and his missiles are just constantly hounding you. He has some really great voice lines, and you could tell he's basically a nihilist, and he lives for the money. But really cool. He's a cool one. V4 Rusty. Where do I even start with Rusty? He is one of the main characters in the game. You encounter him many, many times. You fight alongside him several times in the game. And the story really engineers Rusty to be your friend. He calls you buddy. He's more or less loyal to you, pretty much more loyal to you than any other character in the game. In some endings, you kill him. In some endings, he dies helping you. Unfortunately, he always dies somehow, which is really rough. He has some of the best voice lines in the game. I won't miss. That goes so hard when he shoots the ice worm. He's got a really awesome AC. Very fast, lightweight parts. Handguns are really cool. And he has a spinning blade, which is really awesome. Some of the coolest gear in the game. He's basically a spy for the RLF, but he's posing as a Vesper. So he's got basically playing two sides, but he's on the RLF side. Really cool character. Honest Brute. I love Honest Brute. He's one of my favorite side characters. He was a flamethrower and a chainsaw. Like, how cool is that? He's got really cool body parts, not particularly effective, but they're cool. And he's basically kind of crazy. It seems like him and Cinder Carla had a thing, but he betrayed her, took a bunch of her men and a lot of her money and gear with him, and started his own faction. I believe, the Coyote Devils or something. Something like that. Anyway, Junker Coyotes, that's what it's called. The Junker Coyotes. And he starts his own faction, and basically he's warring with RAD, Cinder Carla's faction. And Cinder Carla hires you to take him out and reclaim this giant rail cannon. And the fight with him, the voice lines he has are so iconic. You could really tell that he's at once crazy, but crazy and amiable at the same time. He's the kind of guy who will lull you into a false sense of security and then shoot you in the head. Very, very cool voice actor. They did such a good job. But he only shows up in that one part of the game, which is a shame. It'd be cool if you could do some missions for him, but who knows? Maybe in an expansion. Gun2 Nile. You only come across him once in the game, I believe, and hear his voice lines once. He's second in command of the Red Guns, but you only see him, like I said, once. He's got a decent AC. He's basically the brains of the Red Guns, while Gun 1 Michigan is the brawn. He's sort of the mastermind and the planner behind everything the Red Guns do. AC is pretty slow, pretty heavy, got some decent firepower, but he's not too difficult. And his voice lines are just okay. But yeah, kind of cool. V2 Snail. Where to start with V2 Snail? He is basically the main antagonist of the game as far as Arquebus goes. He is sort of the de facto leader of the Vespers, even though he is only second in command technically. He leads them. He's such a high and mighty, sort of arrogant personality that From Software really, they want you to hate this guy. And they do a really good job of making him sound like a terrible, selfish person, but yet brutal commander. And his voice actor does a really good job of making you hate this character. But he's sort of the mastermind behind everything that Arquebus does on Rubicon. And you encounter him multiple times. The first time is the fight with the Ice Worm. You actually fight alongside him. The Ice Worm defeats him, but he gets away, of course, and all the characters do in that fight. But he gives you some missions, arrogantly, of course, and always talking down to you as it goes. He believes in Arquebus superiority. Of course, every person in their faction believes their faction is superior, but yeah, huge main antagonist. He actually takes over the Voltaeus machine. Arquebus revamps it, and he becomes the final boss. Well, a sort of the final boss in one of the endings, in the best ending. And really difficult fight. And you do fight him 2 other times, if I'm not mistaken. One, it's a 1v1v1. You and Iguazu and Snail are all fighting each other, which is a really interesting fight. And then another time, you fight him on the Xylem as you're going about other things. Of course, you could completely ignore him. And if you do, he actually brings it up later in the final fight with him, which is so funny. Great character. They did a good job. Really iconic villain that everyone hates and is supposed to hate. So nice. Chartreuse. You only come across her once. She is part of a mercenary faction called Branch. And they are sort of a hacktivist group. She has a ton of powerful weaponry. And if you are not paying attention for 1 second, she'll hit you with one of her big guns and it's basically over. She's sort of characterized as a bulldozer, and she just bulldozes over everything with her powerful guns and her tank, her high defense and tank AC. One of the coolest colored ACs, Umber Ox. I think that means like bronze ox or something, but the green and the golden color really go together. She's a cool character. You only see her once, but it's fairly impactful when you do see her. Thumb Domayan. He is the leader of the RLF, and the thumb refers to the thumb on the hand. So he's the thumb. And you got Index Dunham and Middle Flatwell and Ring Freddy and Little Ziggy. And that's the hand of the RLF. I'm not sure why they do that, but I just think it's another layer that adds to their faction. It's really interesting. He becomes the leader of the RLF after he has visions of a coral entity. He snorts coral as, drug addicts do on Rubicon. And a mutated coral entity enters his system, and he is able to communicate with basically a light wave, and it changes him forever. And he starts the RLF, and it's sort of a mystic sort of group to free the planet from external forces. He has his own internal demons to fight. I suppose, he's trying to free the planet, but he doesn't want to free the coral. And it's a really interesting. He's a really interesting character. Voice acting is superb. His AC uses a coral generator, one of the few, if the only one in the game that does. And yeah, just incredible. Not a typically hard fight, but it is an interesting AC, and they just did a good job with him. One of the main characters of the game, for sure. You encounter him, you fight him once, at least once in the game. It's not a terribly tough fight, but it's an interesting fight that reveals a lot of lore about the Armored Core 6 universe. King, he is, like Umber Ox, part of Branch, this hacktivist group. He's got like a 98% success rate on his missions. He is very sought after mercenary, very good at what he does, and his AC is really good. Although I don't think he's a harder fight technically than Umber Ox is, but in the game universe, he's technically a better pilot, so it is what it is. You only see him once in the game when you're fighting against him and Umber Ox. It's a pretty difficult fight, but you can see that he really cares for his allies, and he seems like a decent person. Gun 1 Michigan. Okay, if Minnow Flatwell was my favorite and V3 O'Keefe was my second favorite, Gun 1 Michigan ties for my second favorite. I don't know, it's really hard. I like them all. But Gun 1 Michigan, in my opinion, the best voice acting in the game. You encounter him multiple times in the story. Usually he's giving you a mission, and he gives you the name Gun 13. He calls you Gun 13, even though you technically aren't part of the Red Guns. But he gives you that designation anyway, because you perform so well under his command. And his voice lines just go so hard. His character goes so hard. Not a particularly tough fight, but in the game universe, he is a top-ranked pilot, and that's why he's second in the arena. When you do have to do the mission to fight him, it is so heartbreaking because you could tell he genuinely cares about his men. And I avoid replaying that mission just because I don't want to see him die. And it's heartbreaking. His banter, his voice lines are easily some of the best, if not the best in the game. I know I said that about V3 O'Keefe, but I gotta change my mind. Gun 1 Michigan. He's so great. Finally, Vesper 1 Freud. V1 Freud. He's a really interesting character. He is the top-ranked Vesper, so technically, in command, he's higher above Snail. But he doesn't care to command anybody. All he really wants to do is be the best pilot he could be. And Snail uses him as basically his trump card. There's one ending where you fight Freud, and that's the only time you see him in the game. But he uses Freud as his trump card to defeat you, of course. You defeat Freud. He's actually not a particularly hard fight. But in the in-game universe, he is an extremely good pilot and top ranked. And that's why he's number one in the arena. Interesting thing about him is he's not an augmented human at all. He just really likes to pilot ACs, and he spends all his time thinking and optimizing his AC to be the best that it could be. And so basically, all these augmented humans who have superhuman reflexes compared to this basically normal guy who just has an obsessive will to be the best pilot, they don't hold a candle to this guy because he's just a normal dude and he beats all these superhumans. It's incredible. But yeah, that's it for the arena. There are technically more fights in the arena. These are all mines tests against you. You could fight these. You do fight these in the arena, but basically, they're just, you never see them in the game. Actually, there's a couple more down here. This one, this Institute AC, you do see in the game at least once, and you do fight it, but it's an AI controlled AC. This is actually Nightfall Raven, whose ID you take, and he was part of Branch, and he's kind of a main-ish character of the game, maybe a side-ish, main-ish character. Like I said, you end up taking his ID, his license, and that's why you're called Raven. He used to be called Raven. You take his license because you think he died. But he actually comes back, and there's a couple places you fight him in the game. Both times you beat him, of course. The first is you fight Umber Ox and King, and then if you don't defeat them fast enough, he comes and he helps. He comes and helps anyway, but then it's a 3v1 against you, and that's a pretty tough fight. And then it's another ending. There's a 1v1 with him to see who the real Raven is. His AC kind of sucks. It's not a particularly good fight. He's kind of a pushover as opposed to the other ACs, but he's cool as a character. You never hear him talk. He has an operator that talks, so that's also kind of interesting. Here's Rusty's second AC that he gets later in the game. It's cool. He basically upgrades his AC to this sort of a hero Gundam-esque AC, and I like it. This is Walter. So you actually, in one of the endings, end up fighting your handler. He's taken to a re-education camp by Arquebus and turned against you. And this is his AC. It uses ancient Institute technology, and it's actually an incredible AC. They did a really good job making it cool. He looks kind of like a Nineball from the previous games. Really awesome coral oscillating weapons, coral missiles, coral shield. Cool fight. And the fight you fight him in is so tragic. He knows he doesn't want to fight you, but he's basically mind controlled into doing everything that Arquebus tells him to do. But in the very last scene, he ends up sparing your life, even though he could kill you, in order to let you live. So it's very heartbreaking. And over the course of the game, Handler Walter, in the beginning, he treats you as just another slave, just another puppet for him to control. But over the course of the game, he comes to respect you and care for you. And at the end of the game, you could really see that he comes to treat you as a friend and not just a subordinate. So his character development goes a long way. This is Ayre's AC. Ayre, of course, being one of the main characters of the game alongside Walter. She gives you tasks. She's basically a coral light wave mutation that you get implanted in your brain. And so you could talk to this basically sentient being that exists as a light wave. And of course, everyone loves her, and she is amazing. And she truly cares about you throughout the entire game as well. And in one ending, she comes to help you fight against All Mind in this AC, and it's really cool. Um, yeah, but that's it. That's all of the arena fights, and I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you're asleep by now. If not, you will be asleep soon. Have a good night and sweet dreams.